Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaskar. Today we will be continuing with our discussion on Salesforce management. This is the next stage after recruitment. We have discussed recruitment in lecture number 23, and today lecture number 24 we will be discussing selection. This is the fourth lecture in the fifth module of our course on sales and distribution management. Now, after an organization has gone through an in-depth job analysis and then begun the recruitment process, the next stage which the Salesforce management includes is selection. Now, here the objective of any and every organization is to select the right kind and the right number of people that it requires for its organizational performance, and as and when companies determine the adequacy and the appropriateness of the kind of workforce required, it must go through a selection process. Now, this particular lecture we shall be talking about the background of the to selection. We shall be again discussing what is selection, what is the meaning of selection, and then we shall go deeper and go into a discussion on the various stages of the selection process. So, to begin with, the next stage in hiring after the recruitment process is selection. Now, the term recruitment and selection are often used interchangeably. Of course, there is a difference between the two. I did mention about this difference in the previous lecture, but a quick recap on that while recruitment is a process of attracting prospective employees to apply for jobs in an organization, selection is the process which begins after the applications are received, and the process here, the selection process here is aimed at choosing the right candidate from the pool of applicants. So, recruitment is positive in nature, and it involves a generation of applications. On the other hand, selection is negative in nature, and it involves elimination of the incapable and unqualified applicants so as to identify the best ones for your organization. Now, the objective here is to identify and hire those people who would give to the organization the best kind of performance and the best kind of services. Now, it's important to identify and hire such people who have the who would prove to be the person job fit, where the knowledge, skills and abilities of the particular applicant or the candidate who has applied for a job would match with the job requirements. So, the objective of any and every organization is to achieve a person job fit. In our case, in the case of sales management also, the managerial team which comprises the hiring team, which comprises both the marketing people from marketing and sales as well as from the HR, the entire hiring team is most concerned about obtaining adequate and appropriate number of people, but they ensure that the knowledge, skills and abilities of the candidate actually match with the sales job requirement. So that a best person job fit can be attained, the knowledge, skills and abilities of the potential employee or the candidate here is something which would match the job requirement, and best person job fit can be attained, which will not only lead to increased performance on the part of the recruit or the fresh trainee, but it would also lead to his satisfaction on the job. He would be more happy working on something which he is knowledgeable about, or for which he has skills and abilities, and so the rate of attrition and sales, the labor turnover would also go down. Labor turnover here is not something which is positive. Labor turnover here means attrition rate. So while sales turnover is always good for a company, labor turnover or attrition is something which is not good for a company. When we refer to as labor turnover, what we are talking of is attrition rate for a company. So when the hiring team comprising people from the marketing and sales as well as the HR sit down during the recruitment and selection process, they ensure that what they are able to identify is and hire are people who actually have certain knowledge, skills and abilities which would match the sales job requirement. So a person job fit would be attained, which will be beneficial in two ways. One, it would lead to increased performance of the sales trainee and the new recruit, and this would also mean that the organizational performance will improve. Two, it would leave the new trainee or the fresh recruit more happy and satisfied on the job, because he will realize he is able to do his job better because his knowledge, skills and abilities are something which match with the job requirement. Now, what are the factors which affect the selection process? First, of course, is job analysis. We have discussed what job analysis is. We've discussed the two outcomes of job analysis, which is job description and job specification. Thereafter, it is important the HR team along with the marketing and sales representatives are able to identify the number of people required as well as the kind or the quality they should possess. So adequacy and appropriateness of manpower required is again a factor which would affect the selection process. And the third, of course, is recruitment. It is very, very important to ensure that there is a decision on the number of salespersons required is something which has been arrived at before the selection process starts. Two, there is an effective coordination between people from the marketing, sales and the HR who are all going to be a part of the recruitment and the selection process. Now, organizations must ensure that they have carefully designed selection procedures, very well formulated and implemented, because they can also act as sources of competitive advantage. Why? Number one, the work performance of the newly hired people would actually mean good performance or bad performance for a company. If the newly hired sales force is good, is efficient, is effective, it would lead to a higher performance for the company. Now, this again, with the fact that the good trainees are selected or efficient and effective trainees are selected would much depend on the kind of selection procedures in place. So the first thing which can actually lead to competitive advantage is that work performance depends upon salespeople, and if you have actually hired the right kind of salespersons, then that would actually mean that these new salespersons act as assets for the company and can give a source of competitive advantage to the organization. Second is that the cost of hiring sales personnel is very high, both in terms of time and money. In case the selection procedures are not well formulated and implemented, it would lead to inefficient and ineffective persons getting hired, which would mean one, train them and orient them towards their jobs, which would mean a lot of expense or which has to be incurred by the organization. Two, in case even after they are trained, they may not turn out to be good performers at work, and so organizational performance can get hindered. So it's very, and third, that in case these people are, you have to ask them to leave or they leave on their own, in those cases you'll have to go through that entire process of recruitment selection again. So cost of hiring of salesperson is very high, both in terms of time and money, and in case selection procedures are not well formulated and designed, it would mean that wrong people are getting hired, and the entire effort would be a waste and absolutely futile. The third reason why you should have a very well designed, well formulated and implemented selection procedures is that a good selection process would ensure that false negatives and false positives are avoided. A false negative error here means rejecting a candidate who is capable, and a false positive error here means selecting an incapable candidate. So a false negative error would be when you reject a candidate who is good, who is efficient and is capable, and a false positive error is when you select somebody who is very inefficient, incapable. So, if you don't have a good selection procedure, if you don't have a well formulated and well designed, formulated and selection procedure which is also effectively implemented, in those cases all these three things will happen. Work performance would get hindered. Cost of hiring, in terms of time and money is something which will get negatively affected, and you'll have to go through that process again. And the hiring of such personnel will prove to be very high, both in terms of time and money. And third is that false negatives and false positives are something which these errors can always occur, where you reject a candidate who is capable in the case of false negative error, and you select an incapable candidate in case of a false positive error. Now, what companies have to decide and see is the number of people required, number of salespersons required. So, it is very, very important to determine the number of salespersons that would be required by a company, as this would affect whether a firm is able to achieve its sales and profits targets. So, it is essential that optimum the company decides, and the marketing and sales team decides on the optimum sales force size based on sales forecasting, and then taking into account factors like internal mobility, which could be promotions, transfers, etc., or issues like superannuation and retirement and expected resignations. Finally, they should be able to arrive at the a number on the new salespersons that are required. So, it's very important that the marketing and sales team reports to the HR and specifies the right number and the right kind of persons that would be required, so that the selection process can go smoothly. So, how do you do that? First, you decide on the optimum sales force size based on sales forecasting. Then you take into account issues of internal mobility, resignations and retirements, and then you decide on the number of new salespersons required. Now, there are three methods which will help you determine the optimum sales force size. First is the workload method, the second is the sales potential or the breakdown method, and the third is the incremental method. So, let us discuss these briefly. So, the workload method, the assumption behind the workload method is that all salespeople have equal workload. So, based on this, the first step is to classify customers, actual and prospects, as per their sales potential. Second, determine the amount of time per sales call and the call frequency for each class of customers. Now, each class of customers, again, you could have them classified as high, medium and low potential customers. Then you calculate the total market workload, which would be customers multiplied by the time required per sales call and the sales frequency for each class. This would give you the total market workload, and then decide on the total work time available per salesperson. Divide the total time available by different total time available by different activities per salesperson in hours, and then calculate the total number of salespersons needed by by the following formula, which is total market workload divided by total selling time available per salesperson. So, you classify customers, determine the time required and the call frequency for each one of them, and then you calculate the total market workload. And after you have calculated the total market workload, then you decide on the total time available per salesperson, and then divide the total time available by different activities per salesperson in hours, and then calculate the number of salesperson needed by total market workload divided by the total selling time available with a salesperson. The second is the sales potential breakdown method. We have discussed earlier the breakdown method. So, here what the number of salesperson required will be equal to annual sales volume forecast divided by the estimated productivity of the average salesperson, which is denoted as P, multiplied by 1 plus T. Now, T here is the estimated percentage of annual sales force turnover. So, sales force turnover here, which we refer to as labor turnover or the attrition rate. The third method is what we refer to as the incremental method. Now, the incremental method is based on the marginal analysis theory of economics, where it says that net profits will increase when additional sales force are employed, provided that the incremental sales revenue exceeds the incremental cost of hiring and maintaining another sales trainee or a sales salesmen. So we have these three methods which would help determine the optimum sales force size which would be required by an organization. Now let us move further and discuss selection. So we all know that once the applications have been received, and the next stage is selection, which is all about making the best choice from the pool of applications received for filling up the various sales jobs in the company. Now selection is a negative process, as we said. It involves elimination of the not so suitable candidates and focuses on selecting the best ones, where there would be a person job fit, where the knowledge, skills and abilities would match with the job requirements. Now the selection process is something which could vary from organization to organization and from level to level. It could be a simple one-step process just including an interview, or it may be a complex system, a large number of stages and a huge cumbersome process like conducting various tests, etc., doing lots of checks and putting in a lot of checks and measures before a face-to-face interview is conducted. So before the companies start with the selection process, they also must decide on the selection criteria and this would depend upon the job dimensions which have been defined in the job analysis stage. So a selection process will help assess the KSAs and qualifications of candidate with the objective of determining a candidate's suitability for a job, and it illustrates the series of steps that would be used to describe how new recruits must be hired. Now, as I said, while we can actually explain the process through stages, whether a company uses one stage or two stage, or it is a very simple process or a complex process, would depend from company to company. It would also depend from job position in question. It would also depend on which level of the management hierarchy selection is being done for. So a large number of factors would determine whether companies use a simple process or a complex process, whether they go for a single stage or whether they go for multiple stages, and whether they just follow one step or several steps. And this would depend from company to company. It would also depend from job to job position, from different levels in the management hierarchy, etc. But generally speaking, we say that there are few steps in a selection process. First, we start with the preliminary screening of the application, the group discussions and selection tests, interviews, reference and background checks, physical examination or medical examination, employment offer and the probationary period, and confirmation, final selection and placement. So these are the different steps in the selection process. The process will vary from company to company, from one sales job to another. It would also depend on the nature of the sales job and the time and financial limitations which a company may have. While we start with screening of applications and we move on across 6-7 stages to finally arrive at the final placement or the final offer, each step, each stage acts as a screen, which means that the applicants who are able to qualify that round or that qualify that step move forward or move further, while those who cannot are dropped. So each stage in the process acts as a screen, and the applicant may be dropped at any of the stages due to his or her unsuitability. This would mean exclusion of the candidate from the process and from further consideration. A person who survives all the stages or qualifies all the stages with his qualifications and competence is the one who would be able to meet the job requirements, and he will be the one who will be finally selected. So first we start with the preliminary screening of applications. Now this is the first stage which involves the screening the applications to filter out those who are unqualified for the job. The criteria is of course specified in the job specification, and those who do not meet this criteria are eliminated at this stage. Now candidates are generally asked to complete such application forms where they must provide details on their personal history, their education, their experience. They provide information regarding their basic qualifications, their educational experience, their education, their work experience, the medical history, etc. And this information is assessed to eliminate those who do not meet the desired qualification. Candidates may sometimes be asked to provide information which is more futuristic. take, right? For example, what do they think of they would be doing in the next 5 years, or where do they foresee themselves in the future. So such questions are asked to see if the candidate has a vision of his or her own, and how he could contribute to the organization in the long run, both at his level, at his individual level, as well as the organizational level. Now, most companies use a standard form which candidates must fill, and this is what we refer to as the application blank. So, the application blank are standardized forms, very structured, where the candidate is asked to fill up, details with respect to his personal or biographic data, education and skills, employment status, salary and past work history, his awards, achievements, memberships to societies, his hobbies, interests, extracurricular activities, as well as names of referees and for his signatures or authorization and signatures. Now, the application blanks are very structured and standardized forms, and there are two reasons why they are used by organizations. One, they ease cross comparison between candidates. So, when people have filled up very standardized and structured forms, every candidate or every applicant has provided the same details in the same way. So, he has actually given his own details in the same way, and so it's easier for the hiring team to make cross comparisons. Second, it also acts as a basis for initiating the conversation with the candidate at the time of the interview. Now, these application blanks should not be made very long, because then comparison becomes difficult, and they also should be easy for applicants to fill. So also a long application blank would mean that candidate may not fill it up properly or in entirety, or he may not be he may give a lot of other irrelevant details rather than focusing on more important ones. Also, if the form is very long, the hiring team may have difficulty in scrutinizing these applications. So, the application blank should not be too long so as to make it easy for applicants to fill, as well as for the company to scrutinize them. Now, of course, a preliminary interview may follow at this stage, where whatever details have been provided by the candidate may be cross-checked, and as costs in terms of time and money are huge, it is always better that care is taken at this step, so that unqualified and unsuitable candidates can be eliminated at this stage itself. The second stage in the selection process is group discussions and selection tests. Some companies use group discussions. Group discussions encourage participation amongst candidates, they encourage discussion. The advantage of group discussions is that there is participation and some kind of a bond gets developed between people when they start discussing things. The disadvantage is it is very time consuming. Some candidates may dominate the discussion and not let others speak, and in fact some candidates may not speak at all. So, these could be certain disadvantages of the GD. Most companies use selection tests. These aim at matching the applicant's cases with the job requirements. Now, these tests are again standardized instruments. They facilitate cross comparison. Also, because they are administered in the same environment to all and are uniformly applied, the performance of the candidates can be compared and objective assessments can be made. Now, these tests may be of different types. Here, paper pencil tests, time bound tests, but majorly the kind of tests which are used for sales jobs could be the test of ability, which will actually check upon the mental ability of a person, and his intelligence, special abilities and aptitude tests. Then there could be tests of habitual characteristics, which are more of performance tests and attitude tests and personality tests. And then you have the interest tests, which will check how interested a person would be in doing a job of a salesperson, whether he would like to talk to others, mingle with others, whether he would like to work in teams or individually. And then there is test of achievement, which is the knowledge test. So, tests of ability, tests of habitual characteristics, interest tests and achievement tests, they are all basically aimed at understanding the knowledge levels, the aptitude, the interests of candidates, their achievement levels, how they try to see they check their potential towards performance, towards achievement, and also try to assess their personality types, their interpersonal skills, etc. Now, what are the advantages of selection tests? They are very standardized and very unbiased instruments. The time and cost, they also time and cost saving, as they can be administered over several candidates all over, geographically spread. But the disadvantages is that there are only quantified scores, and these may be misleading. Now, what are the guidelines of a good selection test for the sales selection process? One is test could be used as a screening device. No test can be dependable standalone, and multiple kinds of tests must be used. Tests must be standardized, they should be tested for reliability and validity, and they should be designed and assessed by trained people. That would make them a good selection test. The third stage is interviews. Interviews are formal in-depth conversations with the candidate to evaluate his competence on the job. They are the most widely used. In fact, in some companies, this is the only step and in the selection process, a very, very effective way towards obtaining and verbally verifying the information that has been provided by the applicant in the application blank. And they also provide a very effective measure for judging an applicant in terms of his oral communication, his manners, his attitude towards selling, attitude towards life in general, his personality, etc. Now, interviews are popularly used in the sales function and in other functions as well during selection procedures for a major reason, which is flexibility. Interviews allow a two-way exchange of information wherein the interviewer can get to know the applicant better, and he can ask such questions that haven't been asked in the written test, or are such details which are not mentioned in the application blank. So, the interviewer is able to gain insights into the subjective traits of the candidate better, like his interest and energy levels, his enthusiasm, and the applicant also can get to know the employer better. Good interviews must always review the application filled by applicants well in advance, as it helps them to interact with the applicants in a better manner. So, good interviewers must also always ensure that before the candidate enters the room, the interviewer has actually gone through his application form and application blank, so that he can begin or initiate a discussion or a dialogue. He would also be able to verify whether the information given in the application blank is something which is true and valid, and of course it would, because the interviewer would be well prepared with some background information about the candidate, it would be easy to build rapport and start dialogue. Now, again, the employment interview can be one-to-one, sequential, or by a panel. One-to-one is where one candidate is interviewed only by one person, which would happen when selection process is highly decentralized at the branch. It could be sequential, stage-wise, where the candidate moves from one interview into another panel, or another round of interview, or another third round of interview, or it could also be with a panel. And interview questions could be open, they could be probing, they could be hypothetical questions. Now, important questions that need to be addressed are: who should do the interviewing, deciding on the number of interviews, and the interviewing technique. So, who could do the interviewing? Generally, it is a panel which comprises people from different areas for holistic evaluation of the participants, which is used. There could be people from branches, from regions, or even senior managers at the corporate who can get involved. As far as the number of interviews is concerned, this actually would vary across the level at which hiring is taken place. It would depend on the job position. It would also vary with the selling style. For example, if it's a very core sales activity wherein it involves dealing with B2B customers, companies may go for 2 or 3 rounds before they finally make a judgment about a applicant. And the different kinds of interviewing techniques which may be used could be patterned interviews, non-directive interviews, stress interviews, and rating scales. Now, pattern interviews, as the name goes, are interviews which are very structured, and a predetermined outline is used to conduct them. Questions to be asked are already predetermined, and a variation of this is, of course, the situational interview, where the candidate is given a hypothetical situation and he asked as to how he would react to it. Then we have the non-directive interview, which is absolutely free flow. There's huge amount of spontaneity. Questions are asked about one's training experience, future goals, etc. And the method involves direct questions asked by the interviewers and answers given by the interviewee. It does not involve any standard or structured questions, and the process here is such that one question leads to another and to another. So it helps the interviewers gain maximum insights into the candidates' attitudes, interests and personality. However, when it comes to interpretation, it is something which needs to be very carefully done, as it requires, and an interpretation of such interviews requires the interviewer to possess certain specialized skills. Third is a stress interview. As the name goes, applicants are made to go through stressful situations and their reactions are observed. It is a complex technique which helps judge the subtlety of the applicants, and what this particular kind of technique would involve a team of interviewers, few of whom would create the stressful situation and one of them who would just sit and observe the candidate, his physiological responses, his behavioral responses, so that the panel is able to judge whether the salesperson would be fit to deal with stressful situations, and if and when such situations are presented, how would he deal with them. Another method which we have for interviews is the rating scales. Personal interviews lack objectivity and companies can overcome this by using rating scales, where the scale is shared with the interviewers at the beginning of the interview and provides them with how certain answers or certain kinds of replies by the candidates must be rated on a rating scale. Advantages of interviews are they are face-to-face, two-way exchange of information, flexible. Interviewer can get to know the candidate better. Even interviewees also can get to know the company and their job profile better. But the disadvantages with the interview is that there can always be problems with validity and reliability. Also, interviewer bias and prejudices can be issues which need to be tackled upon. The guidelines for a good interview, that specify the do's and don'ts. There should be a checklist with weightages assigned to critical attributes. Interviewers must possess interview skills which would involve establishing rapport, listening patiently, keeping control of the situation, and proper training must be given to interviewers so that they ask the right questions and evaluate the candidates objectively. After this stage, we have the reference and the background check. The reference check actually helps verify the factual information provided in the application blank and in the interview from external sources. Credit checks are specially done for such positions that involve financial dealings. Now, reference checks can be both verbal or written form, may be done through letters and emails or telephones or even personal visits. Of course, there is a point of caution. The candidate may give such names as referees who would speak favorably about them, or some referees may write favorably to get rid of a candidate. So, one has to actually assess whether the name of the referee or the kind of referee which have been given by the candidate is something which can be relied upon. Companies may often use multiple sources to check and cross check. Thereafter, companies go for a physical or a medical examination. In fact, it determines whether a candidate is physically, has the physical ability to work, or whether he suffers any kind of medical issues and health problems. And in fact, physical examination is a mandatory requirement for several sales jobs, and where prospective sales employees are made to undergo physical examination, physical and fitness tests, and certain tests are prescribed by companies before, and prospective employees are asked to submit the health reports before final job offers are made. So, job offers are often conditional upon the candidate being declared fit by the doctors. Finally, the last two stages where there is an employment offer and a probationary period. So, the job offer is made, the candidate, now an employee, is put into a probationary period which could be anywhere between 6 months to 2 years, depending upon the level of hiring, which level he has been hired and for what job position he is being hiring. And of course, after the probationary period is over, a final selection is made and the salesperson is confirmed and placed at the appropriate job position. So, this brings us to an end of this session. The references are as follows, and we are now concluding with the fourth lecture on the fifth module of the course. hope you found this session useful. Thank you.